Here's an interesting article I discovered this morning on the BBC website. One of my subjects. Tornado chasers face storm as lawsuit hits close to home. Down below, this is going to be a YouTube video, so in the space down below I'm going to put some links to some very interesting stuff, provided I can find them, and they're still out there, like regarding the Reno tornado and things like that, as becomes apparent as I go through the article. For a few brief seconds the rain stopped pummeling the front windscreen of the storm chaser's truck. Not that the weather was clearing. Kelly Williamson and Randall Yarnell were heading northbound directly towards the storm. At the time, this was back on the 28th of March 2017, they were covering the event for the Weather Channel program Storm Wranglers. Something that I'd be very familiar with because I used to watch Kelly's streams a lot back in the day. I was watching his live storm chase on this fateful day as well. As they neared a junction a few miles outside Spur, Texas, a bright red stop sign came into view on the right-hand side of the road. Yarnell was driving his Chevrolet truck at about 70 miles an hour at the time, according to a lawsuit filed on Tuesday. So I want to point out, because the article doesn't point this out, but I'd like to point out at this point that the back roads of Texas do carry that 70 to 75 mile an hour speed limit. So there was no speeding going on. But the ignoring of the stop sign would be an issue there. A video the friends were live streaming for the Weather Channel's Facebook page showed they made no attempt to stop at the junction. The footage cut out a split second before a jeep driven by Corbin Jaeger drove westbound into the junction. Jaeger, who had the right-of-way, was driving away from the storm. All three of them, Williamson, Yarnell and Jaeger, were a respected storm chaser working for the National Weather Service. They're all killed on the spot. All three of them storm chasers. A lawsuit filed by Jaeger's mother seeks up to $125 million, that's £95 million, in damages. It puts the blame firmly at the door of Williamson and Yarnell, whom it calls habitually reckless and dangerous, as well as the Weather Channel. The lawsuit also alleges that the network's concept of presenting storm chasing as an adventurous, thrilling sporting event, and to make its two stars heroes, caused her son's death. Well, the article later on reveals, it talks about, you can speculate all manner of different things. They were too focused on intercepting the storm. Maybe the stop sign wasn't spotted. Maybe some sort of distraction. For whatever reason, they didn't stop at that stop sign. Back to the article. The official history of tornado forecasting began in Oklahoma City in a rather informal fashion, so we go back over the history of it all now. When a tornado plowed through Tinker Air Force Base on the 20th of March 1948, it was the costliest in Oklahoma's history. It destroyed 32 military planes, tossing them across the runway with recorded wind speeds of 78 miles an hour. An investigation was launched, and Mayor Ernest Forbush and Captain Robert Miller began compiling weather data from before and after the storm, only to realise just 5 days later that conditions were worryingly similar to those of 20th of March. The base issued the first ever official tornado forecast. Men found cover and aircraft were put away into hangars before another storm of similar intensity passed through. Image: tornado bearing down on a farm near Windward, Oklahoma in May 2016. Within just a few years, the Severe Local Storm Warning Centre was created to predict storms based in part on Forbush and Miller's indicators. But even then, predictions remained unreliable. Forecasters were often wary to announce storms for fear of causing panic or making people complacent if the storms was only through adopting computers in the 1960s that forecasters' work became more reliable, and as the science of storm prediction became more accurate, storm chasing soon developed into a phenomenon. David Hoadley is credited as being the father of the pursuit. After a thunderstorm tore through his hometown of Bismarck, North Dakota in 1956, he began studying and tracking extreme weather across the US. In a magazine interview, Hoadley described setting off alone to see his first major tornado, driving against a wave of fleeing traffic near Dodge City, Kansas in 1965. It was a moment I'll always remember, the police radio, the patrolman describing some unreal hypnotic event, the ghostly sirens moaning in the wind, and that classic cone tornado, so close and deceptively graceful as it descended to create a moment of history in the life of a small town. In the 1970s, the National Weather Service, NWS, created the Skywalk program to train storm spotters. After a 2-hour training course, volunteers around the country provide reports on dangerous weather, and their main responsibility is to inform the service about severe local storms. The NWS says there are now about 400,000 trained weather spotters across the US. While not all chase tornadoes, there has been an anecdotal rise over the past 25 years in the number of people turning out to follow storms. Storm chasers tend to put this down to one event, the release of the film Twister in 1996. Yeah. One person who was inspired by Twister would have been Reed Timmer, of course, heavily inspired by the film Twister. The film, starring Bill Paxton and Helen Hunt, profiles a team of principled but poorly funded tornado chasers competing against richer rivals. One meteorologist reported that applications to study meteorology were jumped 47% in the years after the film was released. More on Twister in a moment. During the peak tornado season, typically from April to June, hundreds of storm chasers can gather in parts of the Great Plains in the US, especially in states like Oklahoma, Kansas, and Texas. There are now even tour operators who take groups out to chase storms throughout Tornado Alley, a vertical belt across the US where the storms usually form. Well, not usually, but not exclusively so. There have been big tornado outbreaks over the years that have occurred a lot further east, back towards Alabama, that sort of Tennessee, that sort of area. But despite the risks of tailing a violent and unpredictable weather system, the first deaths of storm chasers directly attributed to a tornado itself were in 2013. The picture you see on the screen at the moment is the aftermath of a deadly tornado in 2011 in Oklahoma. You see the damaged path, you see trees stripped bare to the bark. And a vehicle's been tossed up against what's left of a tree. Early in the evening of 31st of May that year, a violent weather system produced 8 tornadoes near Oklahoma City in little more than 2 hours. The tornado that struck near the town of El Reno was the largest ever recorded, stretching across 2.6 miles, 4.2 kilometers, and carrying winds of up to 302 miles an hour. The tornado and associated flooding killed 22 people, including 4 storm chasers. 3 of those were experienced and known to be responsible, but were caught out when the tornado accelerated and suddenly changed direction. The 4th victim was a local inexperienced storm chaser who drove directly into the tornado's path. They weren't the only ones around that day. An animation produced by one weather watcher showed how many registered storm chasers were in the path of the tornado as it struck. Which is a video there. Looks like a YouTube video. Most storm chaser deaths, 7 have been in car accidents, and all but one of those have occurred since 2005. Even before the fatal collision in Texas in 2017, one meteorologist and storm spotter of 45 years, a guy by the name of Charles Doswell. So I'll link to his website down below if it's still there, because he's got a lot of interesting articles on his website if it's still there. I haven't checked yet. About responsible storm chasing and all that kind of stuff. He's also got some very interesting views about the movie Twister as well. Some articles on his website, if I can find them. Said he was increasingly concerned about chaser hordes who were obsessed with getting as close as possible to tornadoes. He wrote a blog post rather than observing from a safe distance. The so-called chase community, which really isn't a community at all but rather a group of people with a shared hobby, needs to take a long look at their behaviour during their chase activities, he wrote. If someone has done some irresponsible driving in the past, this might be a good time to resolve to discontinue such practices for good. The time is long overdue to get serious about ceasing illegal and unsafe driving during a storm chase, or any other time for that matter. No one gets a free pass on the roads, and this includes people chasing for TV. The Weather Channel is not alone in broadcasting thrilling documentaries chronicling the lives of storm chasers. The Discovery Channel, National Geographic, and the BBC, among many others, have done so too. But the lawsuit against the Weather Channel alleges that the network had been warned by other storm chasers about Williamson and Yarnell's history of reckless driving. It also says that their failure to stop at the junction where the collision occurred was their 4th traffic violation that day. Instead of using meteorologists experienced in the tracking of tornadoes, the lawsuit says, the Weather Channel knowingly chose 2 chicken farmers and cattle ranchers from Missouri without any emergency first responder or meteorological training to star in their show. I must interject at this point and say, I watched a lot of Kelly Williamson streams, live streams, and pre-recorded or recorded after the event videos as well. Those 2 guys were quite senior aged, and they did appear to be quite responsible in what they were doing. To say that despite their lack of experience, Kelly Williamson was often the one who got on the tornadoes. He got the tornado footage when other people had bust days. He kind of knew what he was doing. But you have that one day with maybe that one momentary lapse of concentration. But let's get back to the article. The Weather Channel then instructed them to barrel into dangerous weather conditions. I'm not sure if they did that. Instruct them to barrel into dangerous weather conditions to obtain footage needlessly endangering local residents fleeing impending catastrophe. The channel told the BBC it could not comment on pending litigation. In the picture, Jeff Frame near a tornado in Kansas in May 2016. What is that? That supercell storm in the background? Maybe rain wrapped? It's hard to tell. You can see an area of dark descending down to the ground somewhere within that rain. Meteorologists and storm chasers appear split over whether televised storm chasing is increasing risks to people on the ground, and whether those live streaming tornadoes for television are providing a valuable service or not. Jeff Frame of the University of Illinois Department of Atmospheric Sciences says forecasters often watch live streams to understand a storm's changes in real time. Images distributed from the scene on social media are often extremely helpful for those who need to issue warnings, he adds. But meteorologist Ryan Moe says he could see no net benefit to live storm chasing on TV, and that the risk to chase the storms may outweigh the arguably minimal extra information Tour operators say they warn groups about the dangers of what Kim George at Tempest Tours calls citizen chasers, which she says is a greater issue every year. When you have too many people going down the same roads, it can be difficult to stop and move off the road, she says. We have a radar that shows where most of the chasers are converging, and we avoid those areas. This phenomenon is known as chaser convergence. And it definitely appears to be a growing problem going back over recent years. As from my own experience of watching during, moderate, high risk days or enhanced risk days, whatever they're called these days. Particularly when you get those occasions where there's only maybe one or two storms that people feel are capable of producing a tornado that day. So naturally, everybody is going to gravitate towards those storms. That's when you get big chaser convergence. A spokesperson for Cloud9 Tours agrees, advising people to look both ways before crossing the road, even if it's a one-way road. Other chasers may be focused on the storm and not watching the road ahead of them. For Dr. Frame, who will take a group of students to the Great Plains in May and June, the number of people storm chasing is not the problem. This has remained fairly constant since around the mid-2000s, he says. The bigger problem, according to Dr. Frame, is bad driving from chasers who are either distracted by the storm, do not park far enough off the road to keep it clear, or who do not rest sufficiently before chasing. I would say it is a few bad apples. He says most storm chasers are safe. Captain Paul Timmins agrees. He's worked for the Oklahoma Highway Patrol for 3 decades, and he says chasers typically don't cause problems on the roads. Kind of depends on the season, he says. Brief pause. Yeah. There are some people who go out storm chasing just to get a closer view of a tornado or a hailstorm, and they end up having to ride it out. Leave it to the professionals, he advises. Dr. Frame also says that problems are likely to occur among inexperienced chasers who are more likely to panic when they find themselves trapped by a storm that changes direction suddenly. Inexperienced chasers should look to buddy up with someone who better understands storm systems, he says. Mind you, having said that, the Reno tornado claimed the lives of 3 experienced storm chasers because of a sudden change of direction, as they mentioned earlier in the article. Controlling crowds of enthusiasts is not the answer, Ryan Moe says simple, good, sensible behaviour is. Special laws are not required in the US to regulate storm chasing, he says. The activity is entirely legal as long as one adheres to appropriate traffic laws, stays in a safe position with respect to the storm, and does not waste the time of emergency responders by blocking roads. Common sense goes a long way, and this tragedy in Texas could have easily been prevented. That's the article. On the BBC website this morning, tornado chasers stay storm as lawsuit hits close to home. So as I said, they've done the story there regarding Kelly Williamson. Died on the 28th of March 2017 due to a road traffic accident and the failing to stop at a stop sign. But quite a lot of stuff is talked about in that article. The Reno tornado, Chuck Doswell. Have a look below. I'm going to stick some links there for further research and for anyone interested wanting to delve into some further material, shall we say, which is connected with some of the things that's mentioned in this article. So that about wraps it up from me right now. So thanks for watching. See you next time.